I'm Dr. Jaime Module. Welcome to Module 9 of Part 2 in the course, If You Want to Fly Higher, You Must Be Lighter. In this module, I want to focus on giving and receiving. And those two are critical that they are together. They're two sides of a coin. But too often, at least in my experience growing up, I was socialized into thinking that giving was really the most important thing that I could do. I remember when I was pretty young, asking my mom, what makes you happy? And she said, what makes me happy is seeing you happy. And she was this selfless person, and that was really the model. To be selfish, to think of yourself, was bad, but to be selfless was good. And so I even had these memories of being hungry and waking up in the middle of the night and going to the empty refrigerator and just skimming off little bits of whatever there was to eat because I didn't want to seem selfish, right? And even though it was something that was important, like I was hungry, I thought so much that was wrong, to take care of myself. And there was, in fact, I gave my mom the giving tree as a Christmas present one time, thinking that was a perfect description of her. But really, that story, in a sense, is kind of sad because the tree just got used and cut up, and then it was done. And that's a way that I grew up. And that story, Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, the couple gives each other a gift that came from something that they really valued a lot, and it turns out that the gift they gave was for what the person gave up, and so it was kind of a sweet story, but also highlighted that this is really noble to give of something that you really care about, so that you don't even have it anymore. And while giving and sacrifice is really, really important, receiving is really, really important. And so in this module, I want to talk about giving and receiving in a few different ways. And first, to recognize the value for us of receiving all of life's gifts, whether they seem like gifts or they don't really seem like gifts. There's an expression, it's not so much what we give as what we share. And I really value that, because that goes more to this idea of both people contributing, both people having something that they give and get. And I'll give you some examples in a few minutes of some real powerful business models that are all about collaboration and cooperation. And so, but let's just talk about giving and receiving for survivors. That can be really, really difficult. For me growing up, besides being told that I should be selfless and not selfish, and I should always give and think of others and put others before myself and all that, when I did get some gifts, they're linked to the grooming process that led to my abuse. And so that was always a strong trigger. And so for the longest time, I was uncomfortable with receiving, even though, I did like it. It's a good thing to receive, but there was often that association as well of not really being able to trust and not really being able to celebrate and to appreciate and so on. That was toxic. That was the seed that was planted, and we talked before about triggers. So, and I've mentioned Brene Brown in an earlier module when she talked about being vulnerable, that people who are vulnerable are really open and strong, and not just open and getting hurt. But even if people are hurt, that they know that there's a possibility of good things to come, and they know that they are worthy of those good things. So giving and receiving rests on this attitude that we are worthy to receive, and that whatever it is that we receive, that can be something that becomes a gift. And so, for example, there are nice gifts like praise and material things and time and attention, things that really help us to recognize who we are. And there are other things that don't seem like gifts. They may seem, like punishments or challenges or things like that. And the movies are made of them. And in fact, there are Greek mythology that are made of those. Spider-Man, right? He was bitten by some bug, and then all of a sudden it messed up his life, and he became a superhero. And I know Avatar is a person who couldn't walk, but then they went into this avatar body and they became a hero. All these hero stories. Malcolm X, a real person who saw his father killed by a Klansman, who at one point was very militant and outspoken against white people in general, and then was transforming to become, I think, a positive example of recognizing the commonality of all people regardless of race. Unfortunately, assassinated by people who were in that same kind of militant ethnocentric place that he was and that he was moving from. Gandhi, thrown off a train and recognized segregation and then became this catalyst for social change, not just in India, but throughout the world. And, Rigoberto Menchú and Moses, if you think of biblical figures, started off in a basket, enslaved, and so on, and became this heroic figure. Rosa Parks, CNN heroes. There's that show every year that highlights people who have dealt with really painful, difficult things, and then who have used that as, not at the time maybe thinking it was a gift, but using that experience in a way to gift others. So they received that experience, they accepted it, they worked with it, and then they could be a gift giver. They could be maybe a wounded healer, as I've used that phrase. That wounded healer comes from a Greek mythology story of Chiron. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly. But Chiron was the wisest of the centaurs, and he was struck by an arrow that had been dipped in the blood of Hydra. Since he had his internal life, he was in internal pain and suffering. And so his journey to heal himself then helped him to be a healer for others. And that's really the model of a wounded healer, that whatever life experiences come to us, however painful, that in our own searching for our own wholeness, health, healing, those are all related. Healing, wholeness, holiness. That we become a healing presence for others. That is our potential when we can really receive those and then we can really give those. So I hope you will become a wounded healer. And I hope you'll become a person who can understand giving and receiving in different ways. And so here are a couple of examples. I think there are stages of giving and receiving for victims, for people who are traumatized, for people who are suffering. I wouldn't think of asking people to do a whole lot of giving. It's right that those people are receiving support, receiving attention. And it may make sense that people who are in a victim state would take, would steal, would not show a lot of appreciation. That happens. Survivors may express that a little bit differently. Survivors may kind of hoard, be a little bit untrusting about giving, may give in order to get, may be kind of competitive. And yet there are other ways of giving that are more about sharing, that are more collaborative. And there's a corporate example of this. In Spain, in Basque Country, the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation now has about 350 corporations. It started in the Spanish Civil War when this ethnic community was being attacked, was being wiped out because they represented something that wouldn't go along with Franco. And these people started a small business together. It was all about cooperation. It was all about sharing, not for profits, but for people, to create jobs. And that model has grown. It's very powerful, very successful economically. And they're very clear about their values of sharing. And so you can look them up. It's an amazing place. I've visited the place. And when I was there, they shared this story that was part of the culture. And they're thinking about sharing, giving, and receiving. He called it the power of three. And the idea was that you can take three in different combinations and get a lesson out of it. And that a lot of times our competitive ways of giving and receiving are 3 minus 3. So nobody really wins. The next level up of that is maybe 3 divided by 3. So you might, out of that interaction, have a little bit of something left over. But it's really less than we started. So there's 2 subtractive ways. And I might think of the victims and survivors. We might often behave in those kinds of ways that are subtractive because we're so focused on maybe being reactive or being untrusting or making decisions out of bad boundaries. That we're too trusting or too untrusting. Then there's the 3+3, which is great. Means we both gain a little bit. And that can happen individually when we start to be able to give, to be able to receive freely. And then there's 3x3. And we think of that as when people really collaborate, when we decide that it's not just for them that they're going to give or work or make an effort, that it's for the shared good. And when enough people in this corporate setting collaborate, they have 3 exponential 3. So there's an incredible network of support, and there's incredible ways for people to innovate and to continue to learn, to be sustained. And so I would hope that in your learning and your healing, that you take your experience and start off with developing a good, solid base of giving and receiving individually, and then find out how you might share that with others, and be able to be a catalyst for change in groups, and then perhaps even down the road. One of my hopes is that I can be a catalyst for helping to promote healing and to end abuse everywhere. That's not going to happen just because I think it's important, but when everyone collaborates together and we find systemic solutions as well to help end abuse. So I do hope that you will become part of the solution. A common way for people to react when there's a problem, when there's someone in need or suffering, is that the people address that individual as an individual and address those symptoms as the problem. And that's necessary at times. When people in a victim state, we're like being in an emergency room and we need help. Then there's another approach that's kind of self-help, and that may be kind of like this course or support groups, where people get together and they share and they learn and they do help each other to get more support, strength, hope, direction. And then when people see that there are systemic problems that led to the abuse, the loss, the exploitation that they experienced, they realize it was intolerable for themselves. They want to make sure that it doesn't happen to others, and they look for ways to work systemically to help change society. And that's way down the road. That's part of part 4. At the very end, we start talking about being an advocate. But that's also in this continuum. When we've fully received life's experiences, when we've worked with them, then they become resources that we can share for others' benefit. So right now, maybe more of a place for you to be in a self-help place, maybe more important for you just to have some good interaction with other people, but know that there's a whole lot more. So I encourage you to continue to think about being more free and think about the ways that you have benefited, and down the road, when it's time, then to be able to be a catalyst for others and for society.